Second phase here, I did tell you that I talk a little about false dealing. You've heard the term bottom dealing. Second dealing, is that something you've heard of? Yeah, you too as well, Larry? You guys have been around the block. Here's the way this works. If I had the ace of spades on top of the deck and we were playing in a game, I'd want to deal that card to Larry unless I didn't, which means that I wouldn't deal him the top card. I'd make it look like I was dealing him the top card, but I would be keeping it on the top. That's why it's called second dealing. It's an odd concept. It looks like the top card is coming off the deck, but in fact it isn't. So this is something that one could do, and this requires practice. Now, bottom dealing, some people say, is even a little more difficult. In this case, you'd place 4 aces on the bottom of the deck, and again, I want you to see that this is not an optical illusion. The aces really are on the bottom. What I'm going to be doing here, this works with 5 or 6 hands in the game, but in this case, I'm going to deal my opponents a card and myself a card. His cards come off the top. My cards come off the bottom. This is cheating. Now, the most elaborate form of false dealing is something called center dealing. This was literally unheard of 70 years ago. It's almost never been seen. And well, I'll actually tell you about its origins. In 1933, 2 men who I believe were the greatest card handlers in America, a man named Charlie Miller, who is living in El Paso, Texas, and a man named Di Vernon, a Canadian living then in New York, received a phone call from a mutual friend. And this guy said, there's a fellow out here in Wichita who can deal from the center of the deck. These 2 men hung up the phones, packed their bags, and left for Wichita. Well, what made 2 grown men travel so fast and so far? I'll try to explain in layman's terms. If I were going to deal 4 aces from the bottom of the deck in any normal game, bridge or gin or canasta or poker, I would ask the person on my right, in this case Jeff, to cut the cards. So if the aces were on the bottom, you would be cutting them into the middle. So before I could deal them from the bottom, I would somehow have to nullify your cut. Now, this is possible. I could do the hop, the pass, the shift, sauté, la coupe. But these are difficult maneuvers. And they're especially difficult because everyone's staring at your hands at that important part of the game. If instead I could leave the 4 aces anywhere in the deck and deal them by feel, this would be an enormous advantage. And that's why Charlie Miller and Vernon went to Wichita. And they knew the name of the man they were looking for was Alan Kennedy, but they didn't know where he lived. So they went to gambling joints, pool halls, bowling alleys. They wound up having a very frustrating week. And they were actually unable to find him. They were packing their cars to go home when Vernon noticed a little girl eating an ice cream cone with obvious pleasure. And she tripped and it fell to the ground. And being a gallant soul, he gave her a nickel and she came back with another cone, smiling. And he said, little girl, do you know a man named Alan Kennedy? And the girl said, sure, mister, he lives up the road a block and a half. And that's how they found Kennedy and saw the center deal. And Vernon loved to tell the story when he was in his 80s. He'd always kind of lean back and say, yes, and a little child shall lead them. So, with that thought in mind, a demonstration of the deal. You can see what I'm doing may look odd in one sense because I'm putting the aces in the deck face up. Why am I doing that? Because it's a demonstration. If we were in a real poker game, obviously the aces would be face down, but this is a case where I want you to see me cheating. And what I'm going to do is give a little shuffle and then try to sense where those aces are as I deal them. There shouldn't be any directly near the top or near the bottom. Let's say we're playing 4-handed. We'll make it 5, a little more theatrical. I would be dealing out 5 hands, and I'd be trying to get the ace in my hand. Now, you could see there was no ace on the top. So in that split second, I choose not to take the top card and somehow dig below the deck to where I feel an ace. You see if I can do that one more time, and one more. And if I can, that would be false dealing.